listening to The Edge, everything bass fishing, coming to you worldwide from Megaware KeelGuard Studios.
Aaron, here we are, buddy, kicking off another episode of BassEdge Radio, clocking in at number 381. Aaron, I got to mention, no major holidays, right, in the month of August. But from a pattern in bass fishing perspective, I would say it is the official entry into the dog days of summer, brother. What you been up to? I've been sweating down here in Del Rio.
Holy smokes, yes. Widespread, obviously, drought, heat for the summer. Would agree with you. Dog days of summer, which makes it the perfect time, Kurt, to do a little shopping, you know. Check out the Megaware KeelGuard. They have been with us from day one, 385 episodes, bringing the goods here on BassEdge Radio. First do-it-yourself keel protector, the battery guard, the flex step, so many things going on over there. And for those that haven't, make sure that you go to keelguard.com to check out all of their products. Kurt, Tackle Warehouse Pro Season Finale right now, going on live as this show comes to air.
Yeah, man, it's a wild event to conclude at Champlain, right? You got the points race going on. This is their 6th event, final regular season event, determining who's going to make that title championship. And, dude, I mean, 2 pounds could separate 30, 40, even up to maybe like 50 spots. So ounce is so critical, and a wild, as always, is Champlain, a wild finish, especially when you have it at the conclusion of your points race, man. It's culling critical this tournament, right?
Yeah, for sure. You know, and I always kind of reminds me of like tournaments on Bull Shoals, to where you get those just marginal weights that can make a lot of difference. You don't think that that's the case, but then when you come in, like you said, 2 pounds can either get you a handshake and a big check, or a pat on the back that says, hey, go get them next time. So.
Right. Yeah, it's like catching a couple 3 9s versus 3 4s or 3 5s at the, that's like 8, 9, 12, whatever it is, ounces, at the end of the day, just those little calls or just that little bit better quality fish. And it can make a difference of 15 to 20 spots in the standings, just that little bit of weight. So it's a wild deal to watch, but it's a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. And speaking of ounces, let's go to pounds, talking about 2 bags over 100 pounds. What in the world? I think that was on the St. Lawrence, right? Yeah, man. They went out of Clayton, New York for the Bassmaster Elite Series. They had been going out of Waddington, right? And anglers had to make these huge long runs to really, get in that mid-20s range. A little bit tougher to hit that mid-20s for 5 fish limit in the river. A little bit easier to hit it on the lake. So they went out of Clayton, New York, which is much closer to the lake. And, dude, that's why it was so crazy. On day one, Aaron, 20 pounds even got you 60th place out of like 95 Elite Series anglers.
How many times have you walked across the stage with 20 pounds and you're in 60th place? You're like, I feel like that's a good day. And then you're just like, okay, I didn't even make
I would say probably for 80% of the country, 20 pounds of smallmouth is an epic bag. And you cruise across the stage, you drop them on the scale, and they're like, better luck tomorrow.
Yeah, it doesn't even get you a shout out. They just hand you your weigh-in slip, right? Yeah. Right.
So congrats to Corey Johnston. Let me mention real quick, and you're much better at pronouncing
Jay Prescott. Jay Prescott. I think he had 102.9 and Corey had 100.5. So hats off to them. And, shifting gears a little bit, Kurt, two people that have kind of made these whole discussions and really our sport both just consummate professionals and really just, 2 individuals that have taken our sport to where it is today. And that is, the passing of Ray Scott and Dee Thomas.
Yeah, man. Of course, Ray Scott, more or less the inventor of tournament bass fishing. Probably we don't have much of a podcast if it wasn't for Ray Scott. His vision of education, which we're based here.
Yeah, conservation.
At BassEdge. Yes, conservation as well. Creating a sport out of a recreational hobby, right? That's really what Ray is. And then Dee out there in California, Dee Thomas, Icon, also fished many BASS events early in Ray Scott's organization. And Dee, the father of flipping, right? He more or less invented it out there, on the California Delta, flipping up big fish on the toolies and that kind of thing. So certainly the thoughts and prayers with those families, and obviously they'll be greatly missed in the bass fishing community.
No doubt. And then, of course, Ray Scott's legacy, meaning Bassmaster, they came out with some pretty new announcements, I guess, concerning moving forward.
Yeah, Aaron, with the Elite Series, as you're aware, they announced this a couple weeks ago. Little scuttlebutt out there on social media about it, but they've always changed the Bassmaster Opens programming. It seems like every 3 or 4 years they do a little changing, whether it's having 2 divisions, 5 tournaments in divisions, having 3 divisions, changing up how anglers qualify to fish the Bassmaster Elite Series. Now with this announcement, anglers fishing the Bassmaster Opens in attempt to qualify for the 2024 Elite Series will have to fish all 9 Bassmaster Opens in 2023, and the overall Angler of the Year standings in those Opens will determine the qualifiers. The top 9 get the invite. Top 9 of the Bassmaster Opens in 2023. Man, I'm looking at probably this is going to cost an angler about $35K. You put a guy like me out there, it's probably going to be a little closer to $40K.
You gotta have those nicer hotels and or nicer campgrounds, I should say. You gotta have a little comfort. We're getting older, Kurt.
Yes. But I think you can get it done for about $35K. You add everything up. The biggest expense is going to be fuel. Even if fuel prices go down a little bit, it's probably still going to be the biggest expense. Second largest expense in this effort will be the entry fees. Third will be the lodging. Then you kind of break it down from there with food, incidentals, and all of a sudden you're on your way to qualify for the Bassmaster Elite Series if you fish all 9 events in the Bassmaster Opens for 2023. Aaron, I've been just got home. It's been about 10 or 12 days since I got home from ICAST. We haven't talked about it here in the opener, but that's because we've got a special guest with our segment B programming. We are going to give you the full scoop on George Acord from Susquehanna Fishing Tackle's assessment of ICAST 2022. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back with more BassEdge Radio.
Nitro Performance Bass Boats. Get pro-level performance with the Nitro Z18, the official boat of Major League Fishing. The Z18, with its nimble handling and versatility, sports many of the features in the larger boats in the line, like a Guardian Live Well, a heavily insulated cooler, dual 8-foot rod storage, and our smooth and fast NVT hull. Every Nitro boat is laid out to do one thing very well: catch fish. Enormous front decks, up to 45 square feet on the Z21, allow maximum mobility when battling unruly bass, and feature low-profile gunnels for ease of skipping, pitching, flipping, or landing fish. Nitro Performance Bass Boats, pure fishing machines.
Aaron, as I mentioned in the close there of the intro, we're going to dive into some ICAST 2022 thoughts. And man, it's great to have a longtime friend. And I'll go ahead and say he's a certified tackle junkie. We got him on the show today. Owns a retail shop with his brother Mike, Susquehanna Fishing Tackle over there in Columbia, Pennsylvania. Man, welcome industry veteran from angler to tackle shop owner, George Acord, to the podcast. George, thanks for stopping into BassEdge Radio.
Yeah, my pleasure. I appreciate you guys offering the invite. Never turn down any media.
Well, I appreciate that, George.
Even if it's with Aaron?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I actually met Aaron many, many years ago at a Harrisburg sports show, and I forget exactly what he was doing there, and I knew what I was doing there, but I wish I wasn't there.
Yeah, George, that was in the early days. I was actually going to bring that up. 2000, probably 7, 8-ish at Harrisburg. We were up there for 2 years. So that was in the days of BassEdge television back in the day.
Yeah, that was kind of the end of my run there. We were still trying to squeeze everything we could exposure-wise out of every show. That show there was more protect the home turf, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. It was a great show. I always remember the first time I ever went there, it was like an episode for auditioning for American Idol. People were lined up around the block in the freezing cold. But anyway, we better get on to the task, because I want to make sure that we can get as much information out of you as what we can concerning just the tackle business, your experience at ICAST. And, if listeners are unaware, Susquehanna Fishing Tackle, owned by George and Mike, as Kurt mentioned, there in Columbia, Pennsylvania, is a dynamite shop in the Northeast. and you guys offer online sales as well. George, what trends have you seen from consumers at the shop, kind of the spring into the summer, that BassEdge listeners should be having access to, or if not, in their tackle box?
Opposite ends of the spectrum, actually. Finesse trends have been super popular coming out of the late winter into the spring season. There was a ton of interest in things like a Nico rig, which obviously is not new, but it's caught a lot of people's attention who have not been exposed to it. So that was a big thing. Some of the other kind of, I don't know what you call them, fringe or different finesse rigs, like what's being called the chicken rig, that had a minute of fame there, and everybody wanted to get ramped up on. So generally finesse rigs, drop shot, Nico rig, the chicken rig, I guess that's what it's called. I don't know. I never made a cast with one in my life. Yeah,
Iconelli's big on the chicken rig. He's probably pushing that. Seen a few video that he's done, and those kind of things help a lot in sales sometimes, don't they?
Well, they do, and I think they help people catch fish. I know one of the guys that works here is a never-ending student of the sport, and he watched Ike's videos on it and jumped right on it and took it to his local lake, which is fairly well pressured, as most are, and he did great things with it. Came into the store, shared his knowledge with the customers, ramped up, interest in some products. He's a big, we call him Skeeter Steve. He's everybody here has a nickname. He's Skeeter Steve.
I can't say Kurt's on air.
He's a big finesse guy, and he jumped on that little crawl that G-Crack makes, and he was chicken rigging that thing and catching the fire out of fish. So that was like one end of the spectrum of overall consumer interest, and the other end is the opposite, and it was big swim baits. Obviously not new, but I think receiving a ton of interest these days. There's a lot of swim bait people on social media and on, fishing news and channels of all kinds. And, it's really gotten a lot of people to do a little more than just dip their toe in the pool. They kind of jumped in a little bit and got into not necessarily mega big swim baits, but, a bigger glide bait, the S-Waver style, but a little bigger than what most people may have been comfortable with. They probably started off with, the small little boot foot on the ball head and then progressed from there. So those are the two big trends this year that we saw just over and over and over, and still are.
Very cool. Yeah, I feel like that swim bait deal was at one time a novelty item, and now you're just getting that push of some tournament anglers, but specifically recreational anglers that are, like you mentioned, more than dipping their toe in. They're really enjoying going out there and putting that technique to the test and trying a lot of different products that are being offered in that segment. So definitely a growing segment. George, seeing you at ICAST just, 10 or 12 days ago, man, a pleasure as always. I got to get your breakdown. I know you were able to walk the show floor probably 10 times more steps than I did. I was kind of stuck there in the Hayabusa Reigns booth doing my thing. I got to look around a little bit, but what are 3 or 4 items you saw at the show that really turned your head?
That's literally the most asked question to retailers that are at ICAST. Like every meeting begins with, what's the hottest thing you saw here at the show? That kind of question. And it was really cool because the hottest thing I saw at the show was the first thing I looked at, and it was the day before the show at the On the Water event. And I know you know where I'm going with this.
I do, I think.
It's that Z-Man. It's a topwater. It's a hybrid swim bait topwater combo is what I'm calling it. It's called the Hellraiser. What caught my eye about it was, first of all, it was Z-Man. And, we are a very big Z-Man shop here. We love the brand. Their products are legit. So, I'm seeing this Hellraiser. The blade on the back immediately catches my eye as
kind of a chatterbait blade, right? They got a weighted chatterbait blade that's assisting in the action.
It is. It's actually the blade off of a Strike King bait that came out years ago that was not owned by Strike King. It was owned by Ron Davis, who invented the chatterbait. And he also came up with that style of blade that you're seeing on the Hellraiser and kind of leased that out to Strike King. And when that contract ran out, this guy's the consummate tinkerer.
Right.
And he designed this bait, and it really caught my eye because you cast it out and you reel it in. You don't do anything else. So,
right.
For a lot of fishermen who maybe not or maybe are new, top water, walking the dog can be a little intimidating. How hard do I pop a popper? This is literally cast it out and reel it in. We had a chance to fish it on their pond. It is legit. As a matter of fact, the last thing I did before I went home last night was drop my preseason order for him because I want in line on that bad boy. The second thing I saw, believe it or not, is a spinnerbait. Now, I know there's probably Lord knows how many spinnerbaits in the world. This is a mustad spinnerbait. So mustad is branching out. They're getting out of their lane, and they're branching out, and they're doing they bought live targets, so that gave them an exposure into the lure business. They built a spinnerbait called the Arm Lock. And I would like for you guys to look this up and get a picture of it because it may solve one of the biggest problems ever, and that is, boat flipping a smallmouth and having them just straighten your arm out. This thing has a secondary arm that locks into the head that acts as a brace. And, it instantly just impressed the heck out of me. So it's a quality bait. All the componentry is real quality. Believe it or not, George's number 2 at ICAST is a spinnerbait, if you can believe that. You would think spinnerbaits have been done to death.
I'm looking at it as you told me to look it up. I did exactly what you asked, and I see it's basically a additional arm. Instead of coming straight out of the head and going right into the arm bend, which it does, it also has an additional wire arm at the area where the head meets the hook that runs up into that arm bend, like you mentioned, to give it some additional support so that you just don't break that bend, that arm, which we've seen that, and I know I've seen that in some other brands of recently, that it's the tension of that wire blade that gives you the vibration of the blades, right? So you want kind of you go back to the old days and it was all the piano wire, the different diameters of the wire were really important because that was how much vibration you got. But if you got a lot of vibration, that means you had kind of a weak wire, right? And then you had problems like you mentioned, breaking out. Yeah, exactly. So, man, that is super cool. What's number 3, George? Keep them coming, brother.
Well, number 3 is more an observation than it is a product, and it's hook companies. I didn't think we could have 5 more hook companies. I didn't think we could have that.
I didn't either.
Kurt, you've been to my shop. I mean, my hook aisle is like 32 foot long, and you can't put another pack of hooks on that aisle. And here we have all these brands that it's kind of like there must be a lot of money in hooks to entice so many companies to try to compete with all the various brands out there. We have all these wonderful hook companies, just name your top 5, 6 brands and think about all of the styles of hooks. We, our shop is heavy on the bass, but we're also a fishing shop. I mean, you go in my hook aisle and you look at the hooks. I mean, you got little tiny itty bitty size 20 hooks all the ways up to 16-aught giant Beastmaster hooks and every kind of hook in between. We got more hook companies, right? I know that speaks to you a little bit, Kurt.
It does. It's amazing how, the brands have blossomed over the last really 2 to 4 years. And it seems like other companies, major manufacturers, right? Berkeley several years back made the big jump in with the fusion models of Berkeley hooks. Then, of course, you got VMC. They keep pounding, which parent company Rapala, right? So you got a lot of the major manufacturers, and now you're seeing a lot of these medium to smaller companies get into the realm, and some make it and some don't. You've got some interesting designs out there. I think Spear Point right now, probably one of the more different styles of hooks out there. We saw one like that a couple years ago come out, and they just didn't make it. So it'll be interesting how this progresses and what these companies can do to kind of separate themselves a little bit. You talk about Mustad getting into the lure market, buying live target. Hayabusa, company that I work with, launched a swim jig a couple years ago that's been very, very popular. So they're definitely having to open their brand style in order to gain more market share and really eyeballs of the consumers, right?
Yeah, well, not to mention the last couple of years in the tackle business have been a total free-for-all and just insanely selling everything that you can get your hands on.
Sure.
And I think it's enticed a lot of these companies. I mean, Mustad's a huge company with a ton of capital behind them. They launched a series of rods. I mean, they had a series of combos. They're going into this whole slow pitch market in a big way for the offshore tuna fishermen. I mean, they're just doing everything at one time. They're not like launching like live target and then, next spring we'll launch this. No, they're just boom, all of it at one time, from jig heads to line. They bought Tough Line, they bought live target, as I said, and now they're doing rods, and some of them are high end. I saw the price on one of them was like $350 retail.
Wow.
So I know you asked my top three, but 3A is in the same vein as hook companies, and that is rod. I'm not going to say necessarily companies, but companies that are selling rods. They're not necessarily making them, but they're selling them. I mean, the rod market is becoming saturated.
It was interesting. There was a couple of mid-size rod companies that didn't even show at ICAST this year. I guess they felt like it was just time to do something a little bit different from a promotional standpoint for the retailers.
It's very expensive. I mean, I know several companies that we do a lot of business with that stopped going several years ago. They felt that expenditure could be better used a little more one-on-one with retailers. And I get it. It's really expensive. Some of the big boy companies, I can only imagine what they spend. I mean, just from dinners to lodging to on and on and on. But
it's quite the production for sure.
It is, and the other aspect of it that I'm not so sure is the best for our industry. It's not bad, but I don't think it's the best, is it's really, really become a media event. There was guys like me and Mike, there was not a lot of us there. The retailer, first of all, we are super busy right now, and it is a very stressful time for like your team to leave. And the guys and the gals that stay back to work are like under the gun. So it's a tough time for retailers to go to a big show like this. And it's really, it's good. It's really good for us, but it's like, I don't know. I mean, I could see where possibly we would maybe not go in the future at some point if it keeps trending the way it's trending.
Well, and speaking of trends, George, from your perspective, as we kind of close this segment down, you have many years of seeing consumer trends. We're at an interesting time, economically speaking. Where do you see bass fishing going over the next 5 years from a technique and compatible lure presentations? One thing that intrigues me is the gravity plastic baits.
Yeah, I see a couple things happening in bass fishing, one of which I really like. One trend I really like is the youth trend. So from a longevity of our sport, we have all these wonderful high school programs. We have all these wonderful college programs. And I imagine the rest of the country's much like our area here. We have tremendous work being done by groups of people with youth bass clubs and bass fishermen who are passionate about youth, taking their time and resources to introduce kids to fishing. So, that is something I see, but it sparks a trend. And that trend is, very, very social media driven. These young fishermen are really very savvy. They have an appetite that can't be filled with knowledge, and they're not afraid to fish any kind of technique. When I was young coming up, man, give me a big rod and a jig. Get out of my way. I don't want to learn anything else. These guys, they want to learn every little. So from a manufacturer standpoint of view and from a tackle business standpoint of view, things like colors are very important. I hear it literally from the young people every single day. I had two guys in here last night right as I was closing, and they actually came down to two reel choices for them, and they both chose the one that matched the color of the rod. They were both good reels, don't get me wrong, but I think the manufacturer needs to pay attention to things like that. I know we do pay attention, even to the color of the braid. Look at Power Pro when they brought out their Super Slick.
Yeah.
They brought it out in like 6 colors, and it's kind of ridiculous to think that you should stock all 6 colors in every size. In
That's got to be tough for you
300.
guys. Yes.
But you do. And so I think things like that from a sales perspective, but the biggest thing I see trend-wise is the youth, and it's a powerful deal. It really is. And I think we should pay way more attention to high school bass anglers, and speaking just of bass here, of course, high school bass anglers, college bass anglers. I know we've even tried, writing contracts with colleges. We worked with Shimano in the early days of college anglers to actually generate a contract to sign up with the Penn State University bass team.
Right.
And, here's what we expect from you, and here's what we're going to provide for you, and blah, 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 blah. And so that was very interesting. So I really think that's not really a trend in tackle, but it's a trend in business that leads to paying attention to every little detail in tackle.
Good stuff, George. Well, hey, and I agree. What you saw this spring, you mentioned earlier in this segment about the finesse, and Aaron, you popped in on the gravity plastic baits. I think those are two things that, folks want to get bites. Bites are important. Big swim baits are fun. They're cool to watch. Sometimes you get a lot of follows. Sometimes you get a lot of bites. But the finesse approach, especially with gaining recognition of the fact that waterways are becoming more pressured and water is at a premium, those things are certainly items to continue to watch and be a part of. Man, George, thank you so much for giving us your take on ICAST, some consumer industry trends. Tell us again how to find your brick and mortar location there in Pennsylvania and the online store website so BassEdge Nation can find you out there.
Yeah, I'm actually going to share 3 things with you here. So we're located in Columbia, Pennsylvania, just outside of Lancaster. Real easy to get to the shop here. We do get a lot of people that commute in here from like the 3 or 4 state area because it's very easy to get here. We'd love to have you stop by. We're very proud of our store. We have a 5,000 square foot showroom that is it's a mecca, and you need to stop by and meet our staff. If you can't, we are a player in the online game, and we've kind of been doing that in some shape or form since Al Gore invented the internet. And, SFT, that's Sam Frank Tom, sfttackle.com. We have a very active marketing and social media team that updates the website daily and throws all kinds of little social media deals out there. And then, if I may, every Thursday night we do a live show that's called Tackle Shop Live, and we do it right here from the headquarters, SFT, and it's kind of a shoot from the hip. It's pretty much raw and totally unscripted. We basically start out with somewhat of an idea of what we want to talk about. We got a little Sports Center segment that we call Tournament Talk. We got a little nuts and bolts segment that we call Tackle Talk, and then we try to talk about some technique and basically have fun.
Love
that's
it.
Every Thursday.
And have a beer or two along the way.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the end of a long day of work, and
Right.
We do have a beverage or two involved. Actually, we get some sponsors on that front. We have some people stop by and sort of sponsor
Your
our show
alcoholic
there.
intake.
They do, yeah. We have like most parts of the country, we have really good brewing companies around here, and some of those guys will stop by and drop something off. And
That's awesome.
Yeah, so.
Well, it's a great time. We'll have to. I've watched it a few Thursday nights. I'll continue watching it. And George, again, thank you for being on the show with us in this episode of BassEdge Radio. Listeners, stay tuned. We've got a awesome featured angler on this episode as well. George, take care. We'll be in touch. Everybody, stay tuned. We'll be back right after these messages.
I am Bassmaster Elite Series angler Patrick Walters.
This is MLF Pro Circuit angler Trevor Fitzgerald.
This is BASS Elite Series Pro Brandon Pollinate.
I am MLS Big 5 Pro Circuit angler Gray Buck.
This is 2020 BASS Angler of the Year Clark Winland. Stay right here for more BassEdge Radio.
Know the importance of protecting your investments, so why use anything else other than the original and toughest DIY keel protector for your boat, Megaware KeelGuard.
Grinding sand, abrasive rocks, and concrete ramps are no match for our exclusive contoured edge and patented technology. Megaware KeelGuard keel protectors are made tough and made to stick. Their do-it-yourself installation takes less than an hour, providing the longest-lasting, most dependable keel protection for your boat, guaranteed for life. Developed specifically by boat builders offering the best keel protection in the industry. Also from Megaware KeelGuard, SkegGuard, FlexStep Pro, and Pontoon Guard. So give your boat the performance edge. Put on the protection the pros pick. Megaware KeelGuard.
Aaron, this should be another awesome interview, man. I feel like, this is a professional angler, could be slightly under the radar for the casual bass tournament fan, but man, I got to tell you, if you're a junkie like me, something special is going on with this guy. Two-time NPFL champion, current BASS overall AOY leader in the Opens, part ownership in the Bass Tank out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Fantastic to have on the show, John Soukup. Welcome to BassEdge Radio, John.
Yeah, I'm proud to be here, Kurt. Thanks for inviting me.
John, you absolutely lit it up in the NPFL League in 2021. Almost consider that a mic drop. And your tournament resume isn't like it's lengthy. So to see kind of that success that you had there, how do you describe your background prior to 2021, and how did it set you up really for this quick success?
Well, I don't think anybody likes long answers, Aaron, but I do have a long answer to.
Let's hear it.
Listen, I'm 40 years old. My first word was fish. I have ate, slept, and dreamed about fishing since I was born. We had a fish farm when I was a kid. I drowned at 2 years old in a koi pond in the backyard, and I was raised. My dad was an auto body man, but as a side hobby and job, we grew koi. We had mud bottom ponds, and we'd seine them, and every day we were either catching fish with our hands or we were catching fish with a rod and reel. And that's all I remember through my childhood, other than playing a lot of sports and everything else that, a lot of people do. I was a fishing nerd. I was definitely the kid that was made fun of for loving fish. And I love everything about the behavior of fish and the nature down to, like I said, raising the koi. I mean, there's a lot of technicalities of how to raise a fish properly in a mud bottom pond. And you get into the environment of the fish, down to the rotifers and the daphnia and like different photoplankton and like that. And so that all has been with me. Now, when I was, I got married young at 21, younger with nothing to my name. We had nothing. And so from 21 to 27, I didn't even fish. My wife didn't even know I liked to fish. I know that's kind of a weird thing.
Wow.
But I put it all aside to work 80, 100-hour weeks laying tile to provide for my family. And at about 27, I got introduced to the Bass Nation through one of my builders as I was there laying tile. He was actually trying to teach me how to lay tile, and I invited him. He was wearing a Ranger hat, and I said, "Hey, man, how about I just do you the best tile job you've ever seen? You're young, you got pride, right? Too much pride a lot of times. And like, when I do, you just take me out in your Ranger." And he said, "Oh yeah, you like fishing?" And this was my quote. I said, "Yeah, I'm a bass pro. I'm a closet pro. One of these days I'll come out." And that's how I've always felt attached to fish. Now, I did go through a time period where I didn't, because of responsibilities, where I couldn't fish. But back then, he introduced me to the Bass Nation. Back then, the co-anglers fished against the boaters, right? Remember the old format? Yeah. And my first year as a co-angler, I actually made it to the Bass Nation National Championship. My first tournament as a boater was in the 2009 Bass Nation National Championship on Harris Chain. That was the first time I'd ever drove a boat in a tournament on my own.
Oh my God, that's freaking awesome, man.
So it actually lit a fire in me, the competition side and then the love of fishing. And so I made it back to the Bass Nation National Championship again around 2014. So I was, I think, 2 pounds away that year and 3 pounds away the first year to qualify for the Bassmaster Classic. So I've been, one fish away in a 3-day tournament twice to the Bassmaster Classic. And then, listen, with all the responsibilities and a flooring company, the tile, it's all the big three are schools, casinos, hospitals. And in the summertime, I mean, you're just dedicated at night work, weekend work, holiday work.
Right.
There's just not a lot of time for me to compete. Now, it doesn't mean I wasn't fishing all the time and every chance I got. I'm winning local jackpots all the time and things like that. But it was a slow build that I'm happy with. I'm proud of my slow build, to be honest with you. And in 2018, I fished the Forest Wood Cup. I qualified through the Costas, I think, in 2017. So 2018, I fished the Forest Wood Cup, the second to last one there on Ouachita. And during that time frame, my dad actually, he died. He passed away with cancer. He didn't actually get to see me fish the Forest Wood Cup, but he saw me qualify and he knew I was going to fish. And so there was a mental change that happened at that moment in 2018. I loved the opportunity. I thought it was going to be the last opportunity I ever had and the only opportunity I ever had to fish kind of, quote unquote, professionally at the Forest Wood Cup.
Especially like the championship of that magnitude. I mean, at that time, you had the Cup and the Classic, right? Those were it.
Yeah. So all these big tournaments that I had qualified for, they were mediocre finishes. But what happened during the Forest Wood Cup in 2018 is my boat broke down. I had a brand new boat, brand new electronics. Not going to talk brands because I don't think that really matters, because I had just got on catching them really, really good. And when it broke down and when it started, I was coaling and I couldn't get the boat to start back. It was real windy. It was blowing me off. I'd found the deal to at least do decent. And when I finally got the boat started, I just decided to go in because I didn't want to miss weigh-in. Day one, my boat, when it started takeoff. Day two, it broke down on me during the middle of the day. So I was actually happy. I actually was content. It was definitely like one of those spiritual moments in life where you feel like God blessed you with something when you're losing your father and you had this love and care for fish your whole life. That was my bond with my dad, by the way. That and maybe watching college football or something, fishing, hunting, that was my bond with my father. And so this was a special moment. And when I got back, my buddy, Scott Palmer, who we had already started a company called the Bass Tank, but we hadn't done anything with it. The Bass Tank we had all these little ideas that we wanted to figure out how to take it to market. And so we considered it like a think tank for bass fishing. That's where the name of the Bass Tank comes from. And so we had already started it, LLC formed and all that, but we weren't doing anything with it per se. Okay. So Scott's there. He's an engineer and he's driving me back to Hot Springs and I'm telling him about breaking down and he's just as frustrated as can be. And he gets in the boat and he's digging through everything and just like the light bulbs went off. And I looked at Scott and I said, "Hey, Scott," I said, if this is happening to me, like today, I'm one of the 50 most important anglers in the world. Today, not tomorrow, but today at the Cup, all eyes are on you, right? And if this is happening to me, then this is happening to everybody in the industry, And I was blessed with the opportunity to have a live scope on my boat already. I was one of the first 5 guys probably to ever even have one on the boat. Just geographically where I'm located, it just fell in my lap that way. It wasn't because I was more important or anything like that, just right there in the heart of Tulsa. So he's like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, if we can help solve this problem, maybe this is something the Bass Tank can do." And so that was the birth of us getting in the electronics business. It was actually me breaking down in the Forest Wood Cup. Very cool. It's been the heart of the Bass Tank since the beginning was if things in the industry aren't going the right way, we're going to have solutions. And then, boom, the Bass Tank just took off and was not expected. And with its takeoff, it gave me the opportunity. Without the Bass Tank, I would not be fishing professionally.
Right.
And so around 2019, so that was 18, around the beginning of 19, is when you started hearing rumors of this league called the National Professional Fishing League. And so I sent in my resume because I wanted to fish on a high level, and I knew that was probably better opportunity for me to get in through a resume than it would be to work my way up through the tour. And then, the tour was having its issues too when it collapsed to the Cup and all that. So all that was going on. And so I just thought that would probably be the smartest route for me and it just would fit me as a person. And I was accepted. So when I got accepted in 2019, I think they announced it something like maybe at the 2020 Classic or something. I might be off a little bit on my date.
Yeah, I think that's about right. 2020 Classic, and that's when they announced that they were going to kick off a season in 2021.
Yeah, so I just spent all that time putting it into the business. And what that did is the first guys to catch on and really want to know about live scope and things of that nature were the crappie guys. So I trained a whole bunch of crappie guides how to use, forward shooting sonar, live scope at that time. And through that process, I got an invite. Zeke, actually, who's our sales rep, because he's a crappie nerd. He got invited to fish the Wally Marshall. And when he got invited the last week, and Zeke was like, "Yeah, I can go, but John's my partner." And he's like, "Well, John's a bass fisher." And he's like, "Yeah, but he has the boat. I don't have a boat." So it's a team tournament. So Zeke and we fished the inaugural Wally Marshall. I'm going to call it the Crappie Classic because that's the best way to describe it. The Bassmaster Classic of crappie fishing. And the first day everybody's practicing, man, we're at the shop in Tulsa or Sapulpa getting loaded up. The second day we're driving there. We got a day of practice on the water, and it was horrible fishing for crappie. The fish were not biting at all. Long story short, we ended up getting second place in the event. So we got second, and it was good for the company. And so kind of with my renewed mindset of with my dad passing and stuff, I was just enjoying fishing. And I knew that somewhere in 2021, I'd be fishing a professional trail. So I just took that year and a half it was completely off from bass fishing, and I just focused on crappie fishing. So I actually fished the American Crappie Trail, the Crappie Masters Trail, and Zeke and I went and we fished the professional crappie trails for the next year. And so as soon as the second Wally Marshall was over, I put my crappie rods down and picked up my bass rods and
here we go
into the NPFL.
Yeah.
Yep. So that kind of catches you up to that timeline. So I don't think my success was just overnight. It may look like it to others, but there's thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of dreaming about fish,
Right. Yeah. That's usually kind of like the way that the whole thing, I guess, kind of progresses. It's great to hear your story, and for BassEdge listeners to hear your story is, no matter who we ask, it is a unique process, and you never know how it's going to matriculate into this thing that we see from the outside. But it's always fun to hear everybody's story and how that comes out. And John, knowing you, I went to the Bass Tank a couple years back before Lowrance came out with their Live Scope edition and checked out that Garmin. Man, we spent a couple days on the water. I know your expertise with this thing. You are a legitimate live scoper. I mean, and it's been validated. Obviously, this is your preferred method of fishing, right? I mean, live scoping is John Soukup. Is that right?
I've struggled with this question, Kurt. I got to tell you, I love bass. I love learning their behavior. I love figuring them out. I may love figuring fish out more than I love catching them, as weird as that sounds. I love going to new bodies of water, throwing me on there, giving me 2 days, and like, oh yeah, I found them. And then you know what? My dad would hate it. Like, he would hate it when we were pre-fishing. He's like, I want to set the hook. I was like, nope. And I would love just figuring them out. Once I figured them out, I saw it. I didn't need to set the hook on anything. And that is one thing that the electronics and technology, including live scope, allows you to do. And that feeds my hunger to figure out fish.
Yeah, that's cool.
But if the truth be told, if you were to say, John, we're going to catch 8-pounders on live scope using a jerk bait, or we're going to go catch 8-pounders in a frog, I'm choosing the frog all day long. So I get torn, and it's funny because I do have an advantage on the live scope. And so obviously I'm going to use every advantage I have. In every occasion that I have, I'm pretty much any lake, anywhere, any time of year. When I first hit the water, I'm going to go out and look for an opportunity, just like Mike Tyson throwing his uppercut. He's looking for that opportunity, right? I'm looking for that opportunity to throw my uppercut, which is my live scope skill, to do something different, better than other people can do. But I love just getting shallow. I really, really love it. I think that comes from the days being a kid when we didn't have money, we didn't have a boat, and what boat we didn't have a gas motor on it, and we were just dropping belly boats in the backs of creeks in the springtime, throwing, pushing in the backs of creeks. And that's my childhood. And I think you always revert back to how you learn.
That's your roots, right? That's how this all came about. One quick question, John. Are you able to use the live scoping through all tournament seasons and patterns, I guess, if you will?
Yeah. So the answer to that is yes. Now, that's kind of a complicated answer because it's not used the same way every single time a method. And I'll break it down this way. I'll explain it this way. There's basically 3 ways you're using forward shooting sonar. You're using forward shooting sonar to chase individual fish and put a lure on its head and to coax that fish and to trigger that fish into biting. And that's what a lot of people think live scoping is. But no, you cannot do that in every single situation. And I've learned that by trial and error. But that's one of the methods. Most of the time, you're using live scope to position the boat, whether it's off a drop, to find out where a rock pile is at, find out where a brush pile is at, find out where the fish are, maybe the school slid off. So you're using it more as an orientation tool than anything else. And so you can use that almost anytime you're offshore. But the third thing that you're using it for is you're using it for an environmental study. I think this is where potentially maybe that separates the good from the great is understanding, picking up on those environmental factors. And what I mean by that is, let me give you one example. Fall fishing a few years back, I just had live scope. I roll into an area. It's a lake that I fish all the time. I'm not going to mention the lake because I've got tournaments coming on it. But I roll in on it and I'm throwing a topwater in practice and they're just eating it up. But on my live scope, so I'm throwing a buzz bait and a plopper. I'm not seeing the individual fish at all. I'm throwing it up in the shallow rocks where you can't see anything. But I look down at my live scope through like my peripherals as I fish, and there's bait just rolling everywhere. Well, the next day, which is tournament day, when it matters, I show up, I put the trolling motor down, and before I make a first cast, I tell my co-angler we're going to have to find somewhere else to go. He's like, well, we haven't made a cast. I said, of course, we're going to prove it out, right? We're going to spend 15 minutes going to. So we go down it, and guess what? I catch a couple shorts, maybe one little squeaker keeper, and that's it. Where the day before I was catching 3s and 4s and 5s, just left and right rolling, hooks rolled, so pulling them off, but big fish. So without the line scope, back in the day, the next pass may have been with a crankbait, and the next pass may have been with a shaky head. And I might have spent 2 hours or maybe at least an hour for sure on that spot trying to relocate those fish. Instead, because I've got the fly scope and I understand my environmental factors have changed, I pick up the trolling motor and go. We put the trolling motor on high all day long. I end up going into an area I've never been in my life, and there I see it, the bait are rolling, and I know right away it's about to happen. And then goosh, goosh, goosh.
Wow. Sounds like a lot of environmental conditions. You're able to pick up that much quicker things in the environment or in the ecosystem you couldn't see previously. That's really cluing you into your understanding of, yeah, they're probably here, or yeah, they're probably not.
Yeah, and I think it also answers why a lot of times. And I think if you understand the why, that's when you start patterning fish. And the other thing about it is when we're going to these lakes and we got 2 or 3 days practice and that's it, and we have no off limit period and you have no information, eliminating water in practice, we don't talk about it enough. And it is as important as finding fish. And a lot of people will say, well, no, because you find fish. Well, no, like how many times have you been on fish, you're catching fish, but your mind's still telling you maybe if I do this thing or this thing, I might catch bigger fish. And so, like, for instance, when I was in Saginaw Bay 3 weeks ago up in the reeds, catching them, flipping and frogging and swim jigging,
yeah,
people may think, well, he didn't use his live scope. Well, yeah, I did. I spent 2 days prior to that day out trying to live scope catching fish, and I completely eliminated that stuff out of my mind. So when I was up there catching them, nothing in my mind told me, hey, I didn't have to fight no demons. And no demons told me, hey, go offshore and use your live scope. No, I'm just going to stay right here. I've already proven that thing out. I've eliminated that.
Well done. I love the way you described that. Appreciate that breakdown. We're going to continue to hear the story and evolution of what's going on with John Soukup as we power pole down for a quick break. We're going to be right back with professional angler John Soukup.
Patented in 2000, perfected over years of testing and real-world punishment, the Power Pole is the ultimate shallow water boat positioning tool. Swift, Power Pole deploys in seconds from anywhere in your boat. Virtually silent, Power Pole won't spook wary fish. Secure in strong currents or gusting winds in up to 8 feet of water. Engineered to take it with a lifetime unconditional replacement guarantee on the spike. Power Pole, swift, silent, secure. Visit powerpole.com to find a dealer near you.
BassEdge is presented in part by Mercury Marine, returning with professional angler John Soukup in this episode's featured angler spotlight. Mercury Marine, go boldly.
John, a little bit later after we talk about some thoughts of August fishing, we're going to dive into that little live scope setup and the bass tank. I don't know what you'd call it. Expertise, right? There's the sonar expertise and setup over there at the bass tank. But first, we got to talk about some August fishing, man. Bass behavior, which now well known to everybody. What you love to understand about bass fishing, not necessarily catching, but their behavior. Man, it's difficult to predict as they move around, get a little sluggish in this month of August. How do you see bass setting up on lakes in Oklahoma this time of year?
I think you got 3 different kinds of lakes as I'm sitting here thinking, and maybe there's 4, but in Oklahoma, you've got a lot of city lakes, lakes that will have tournament jackpots on, but not big tournaments. And those lakes are typically silted in. They're dammed up of a big creek in the area. Typically, it's got grass around the edges, and a lot of them are muddy. Some of them aren't, but a lot of them are really, really muddy. So I think in August, your main conversation piece, no matter what kind of lake you're talking about, is I think you're looking for the oxygen. So in those smaller lakes, those fish are going to move to the oxygen. So that's a whole nother conversation where that's at. A lot of times it's in the creeks. Those creeks, have wind current blowing. A lot of times the water is 10 degrees cooler in the backs of those creeks. So those fish, I think, are moving a lot towards the oxygenated water in August, probably more than any time of year. And so then you've got your river systems, like an Arkansas River. Right. I think the answer is the same there. Current is not always the answer to oxygen, but it's a big part of it. It's definitely a big part of it.
Yeah.
So you got depth, you got shade, you got other factors that help create current, like the sedimentation on the bottom. If it's a nasty bottom, it's going to eat up the oxygen. If it's more of a harder sandy bottom, there could be oxygen in 6 inches of water. Like on a Texoma that's got a lot of salt content, it's my favorite lake in August. because you can go in 2 inches of water and throw a topwater all day long, and there's big largemouth and smallmouth up there all day long. Because there's so much salt in that body of water, the oxygen level is actually higher up, shallower, and so those big gizzards get up. And that's why we're talking about the oxygen. It's not because the bass want to be there. It's because the big bait.
Yeah.
And in Oklahoma, we got gizzards. For the big fish, you want to target the gizzards. You can catch fish targeting other, whether you're talking about crawdads or other kind of shad or whatever. But if you want the giants, you got to target the gizzards. And then the third style lake is like your Grand Lake, just your bigger reservoirs, your Grands, your Fort Gibsons, your 10 killers. You fall let down by the dam, not any of the other parts. Those, it's oxygen again. And now we're getting into a thick thermocline. So I really like to find the thermocline first. And I think that the biggest fish will reside in and around that thermocline a lot of times if they're not choosing to be one of those fish that stay in a marina or go in a backwater or something like that. So we're looking for the brush piles, rock piles, things of that nature that are offshore
stuff. Yeah.
That reside around that oxygen level.
Great breakdown, man. I like the breakdown of the styles of fisheries. I think oftentimes those are overlooked. Like you just think about XYZ seasonal pattern, and of course there are several seasonal patterns based on what you just explained. That type of fishery so important. Really a fundamental of bass fishing that a lot of people overlook. So great stuff.
John, curious to know how your development has grown with kind of the different venues you've seen the past 18 months throughout the country, and really what would be your take on how to be successful as a traveling tournament angler? Because obviously you've had to kind of come up with your system pretty quickly.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a full answer for that. I'm still in the learning process. I will tell you, I love it. I love the challenge. I love the highs and lows. I mean, I don't know how many days you get off the water and you're like, I am horrible at fishing. I cannot find a bass to save my life. How am I supposed to compete tomorrow in the tournament? And then all of a sudden it clicks and you put it together and you're like, wow, like I'm starting to figure this thing out. So development wise, I feel like I'm becoming a better angler every day. Every day that I'm out there competing, I'm becoming better and better and better. I know I have a lot of room to grow. These northern fisheries have really been challenging, not to catch fish, but to win or dominate or to catch, the big fish. And so, and some of the Eastern stuff has been a challenge for me too as well. So that's a work in progress, to be honest with you. But I do feel like you give me a couple of years out there messing around with that stuff, and we're going to start doing really good out there as well. Because there's something about it, I think, is the challenge. And I think as long as you're challenged and you love what you're doing, you become great at what you're doing. And that's how I feel about it. Like one day I will be great at fishing those northern and eastern waters.
That's cool. Man, I'll take you back just in your mind, 24 months ago, before you kick off the inaugural NPFL season, we all think, hey, man, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to do good. I mean, you're kicking ass, bro. So when you look at that from a 24-month ago perspective and you take it to today, as we talked about in the intro, there's 6 tournaments in the NPFL. You won 2 of them last year. You got probably about 85 anglers fishing all 9 Bassmaster Opens this year. You're leading the Angler of the Year points overall, potentially on the doorstep of a possible qualification for the Elite Series in 2023. When you look at that process, is it a place where you thought you'd be right now? Or how does the mindset created from, that success process?
2 years ago, 24 months ago, you step back, and I'm just hoping that my skill set's good enough to compete. I haven't really put it out there to be challenged at this level. I fished a lot of local stuff and won a whole lot of local stuff and been, like BFL Angler of the Year, Bass Nation Angler of the Year, half a dozen times probably. And, so I've done that. But the first win, it did a lot for me. It did a lot for my confidence. And it was more like, just settle in. You've got this. You know what you're doing. It's not like I had to change anything, do something wild, just be who I was as a fisherman, and it will all come together. And I had a lot of joy, a lot of happiness, a lot of peace fishing. And, Panger called me one day and he made the comment about needing to cash a check or, wanting to do better or something in tournaments. He was kind of asking me about my success recently. And I made a comment to him that I'm going to repeat to you guys. I've repeated it several times. And I said, Matt, what helps cashing checks? He's like, what's that? And I said, not having to cash checks. Don't get me wrong. That's not a cocky statement about my financial state. It's a mental state. If you go out there stressed about cashing checks, you're not having fun. You're not at peace. You're not listening to what the fish are telling you, and you're going to struggle. trying to stay in that happy place, like a Happy Gilmore. Go to your happy place.
Right.
What I'm trying to connect into what you're saying here is the confidence level.
Right.
My confidence level has gone way up. I have felt since I was a kid, I know this is weird, but I have felt destined that this is where I belong, is at the top level of professional bass fishing. How did I ever think I would ever get there? I didn't.
Right.
There's a lot of these things that have been blessings and timing that I didn't plan, that they just came my way. And I'm really just trying to make the most of it. Today, as I sit 24 months later, I think I'm ready, man. I think I'm ready for that top level. I don't think that I'm going to rush in the elites and dominate the elites. I may get out there and be a bottom tier guy, but that's not what I want. I want to be able to be on the elites, compete with those guys, and, have something to say about it. I want that challenge in my life.
We've definitely put the commitment forward, fishing all 6 NPFL events this year, all 9 Bassmaster Opens. I'm sure you're throwing in something around the house here and there for fun. So, but a major 15 tournament schedule is, it's a solid commitment to tournament angling. So the effort has been put forth. John, it's time to go into our listener question brought to us by Nitro Performance Bass Boats. We had a question sent in from Brian Fredrickson. He resides out in San Diego. It's interesting. You talked a little bit when you broke down August fishing about oxygen was your big thing. You talked current. Here's Brian's question. Different part of the country, but fundamentalistic, right? He says, I like to fish the lower Colorado River in the Yuma, Arizona area. This time of year in July and August, it gets really hot, almost always over 100, often over 110. Locally, it's accepted that the fish will be in the river, not in the backwater, because moving water is cooler, perhaps more oxygenated. But the 2 marina areas where I launch have quite a few docks that provide shade. Guessing the docks have some current because they are close to the river channel, about 50 to 200 yards from that main river channel current. What's your opinion to focus on, the shade or the moving water?
You got to answer a question with a question almost. I don't know. Right. I don't know this part of the body of the water, but yes, the oxygen is the most important above all. So what I mean is I don't know what the bait fish are. Like, do they have those giant red ears? Does the bass population have some of those giant 10-pounders that love to eat red ears? Because you're going in July, you still got fish, red ears and stuff, still potentially on beds. So you've got a different environment there to look at potentially than just chasing bait fish like we do in Oklahoma and what we talk about. So, I would have to go out there for a couple of days and I'd have to give it a little bounce back and forth. I'd have to go out and try the current. I feel like that's your number one spot to focus, but, focus on some shade around some docks that potentially still have some giant brim that have just either spawned or are still spawning, could potentially give you an opportunity to catch a giant. And so I would actually say you got to taste test both and let the fish tell you what's going on that day.
My thought process when I first read this question is, well, he mentions the word docks and I'm assuming because they're close to the channel, maybe a marina, and he mentions 2 marinas actually. Yeah. So I throw this out to you, being the live scope genius that you are. Is it as simple as just cruising around the edge of those dots and shooting that forward facing sonar to see if there's fish in that shade?
You can definitely do that for activity. The second thing you do is if you don't see anything but it looks right, is take a spoon or something active and pitch it out there in those spots and watch it go down and see what happens. Because a lot of times you'll have fish, especially on lakes. I'm assuming this lake's also a clear water lake. That area, part of the country, is known for really clear water, right? So those fish in clear water have the ability of just disappearing. Like, you don't see them, and then all of a sudden they show up. So test something out. Throw a bait out there and watch. You may not get bit, but watch if fish chase it down or if they show up.
John, I would totally agree with you on that, because my experience on lakes like, let's say, Table Rock, which is a clear lake, there's some docks on there, but also Lake of the Ozarks, that spooning technique, sometimes they might be completely on the bottom, or other times, like on Lake of the Ozarks, they might be holding right under the capsulated foam, and, distinguishing that on your forward-facing sonar, that can be difficult. So I think you're onto something there. Excellent question, Brian. And John, certainly we appreciate you providing him your thoughts. Brian, we need one more thing from you, and that is to be sure to log on to BassEdge.com, click the Claim Your Prize tab, fill out the information letting us know that you heard John answer your question right here on episode 381, and we will get the Midway USA gift certificate for all things bass fishing and the outdoors sent directly to your doorstep.
And as always, continued reminder, keep firing in those questions on our Facebook, Instagram, and website. You can just simply click the Ask the Pros tab there on the website and shoot us a question you'd like to hear on the show. Have a chance to win that Midway USA gift card. John, real quickly, before we kind of close down the interview, I promised we would talk a little bit about your setup there. Bass Tank there in Tulsa, Oklahoma area. Really, one of those premier electronics shops that can take a consumer to the next level in that department, from powering units to providing units to even as we mentioned, you guys give support to helping consumers understand their electronics once they buy them. But really the big thing nowadays, and we've talked about it a little bit here on BassEdge, is power, right? Power is a critical aspect, from cranking engines, running live wells, running the graphs that take a lot of electricity these days, a lot of battery power, I should say. Give me the John Soukup Bass Tank boat setup that you're running out there on tour.
Yeah, so the answer is clean power as well. So there's three basic fundamentals to it, which includes your install. So we got an install shop, but you've got your battery source, then you've got your harness, which is going to be like your conduit from your powers from your battery to your electronics. And then the other side is the actual electronics that you're using. And so the Bass Tank, we've spent 3 years and we've developed what we call the Bass Tank power harness. And that can be shipped nationwide. Anybody can buy it. They can install it, or they can bring their boat up to us and we can do a custom one for your boat depending on what you need. But we got single and double harnesses depending on how many units you're going to be running. But for me, I'm running ProGuide lithium batteries. I've got an express boat, so I have space issues. I can't have as many batteries as others. So I use a power pole charge system to keep I got two 36 volt trolling batteries running in parallel, and I've got two 12 volt batteries running in parallel. So that basically makes two batteries, if you will.
And both sets are lithium, is that right?
Correct. Everything's lithium, and so that's all kept charged by the power pole charge. I obviously have dry chargers in case something happens that I carry with me, but I haven't had to use them. But I bring them with me in case you have to do something. But then I've got the Bass Tank power harness that runs that power clean to my console and to the front to the trolling motor setup. So I've got at my console I run two 12s. I've got two Garmin 8600 series. For a long time I only had one. But due to the forced pressure of going to waters that I've never been to and have 2 or 3 days to practice, I have two units. So I'll run a down and side imaging in two different color palettes right next to each other along with mapping as I idle around. Because new waterways, depending on a lot of different factors, everything you can think of, one color palette may work better even from hour to hour on one waterway than the other. There's definitely times that I idle through an area and I look down and one color palette, I don't see anything. I look over the other, I'm like, oh wow, look at this. So I need that efficiency in my life. So that's why I have two running side by side. And then up front, I've actually, for a long time, I got away with just having one 16-inch graph, and I would split screen that and I'd run live scope mapping and 2D sonar all at the same time. And I could open up it to a bigger screen if I want to. But recently, with the northern swings and kind of knowing the need for the rock piles, I've added another live scope that's in perspective mode. So I have another unit up there at 1022. I got a 10-inch and a 16-inch on a beat-down mount where I can raise it up. I'm 6'4". Sometimes I want to raise it up higher so I'm not hunched over all the time. I can see it better. And that helps me with efficiency as well, because I do touch my screen a lot. I adjust and readjust a lot of settings, whether it's ranging in and out of fish, whether it's tweaking my gain or whatever. I'm always tuning my units in to that day, to that moment, to that hour of what I'm seeing. And then I've got a Garmin Force trolling motor, which is the 36-volt trolling motor up front. And never ran out of power on my trolling motor, so I've got power for days. Those brushless trolling motors, the efficiency is, I think they're 4 times more efficient. I don't think they're twice as efficient. I think they're 4 times more efficient. It just feels that way as far as how much life you get out of your battery.
That's great information, John, and I appreciate you sharing that. Like Kurt said, this has been a fantastic informational, educational interview. I hate to shut it down, but we do need to call it quits at some point in time, and certainly this will not be your last time on BassEdge. I can promise you that. But any closing remarks or thoughts before we transition out of the episode?
Oh no, my closing thoughts or remarks, man. I'm just like every other fisherman that's out there. Somehow I've been blessed with an opportunity to live the dream. and I'm trying to make the most of it. I appreciate all the support that I get on my Instagram, Facebook page. I've got a YouTube channel, the Hookup with Soukup, trying my hand in that as well. You can support me there and just watch, like, share, subscribe, and, hopefully we can kind of make this dream happen together.
Dude, that's awesome, man. John, I look forward to seeing you down there in early September on the Upper Chesapeake. But I know you got another NPFL event coming up at Sandusky Bay. It's a little smallmouth, largemouth mix over there, man. It'll be fun to watch over there on Lake Erie at the end of the month. So good luck up there. And BassEdge Nation, y'all hang in there. Aaron and I are going to provide some final thoughts on the show in just a moment after these messages.
You know the importance of protecting your investments, so why use anything else other than the original and toughest DIY keel protector for your boat? Megaware KeelGuard. Grinding sand, abrasive rocks, and concrete ramps are no match for our exclusive contoured edge and patented technology. Megaware KeelGuard keel protectors are made tough and made to stick. Their do-it-yourself installation takes less than an hour, providing the longest-lasting, most dependable keel protection for your boat, guaranteed for life. Developed specifically by boat builders offering the best keel protection in the industry. Also from Megaware KeelGuard, SkegGuard, FlexStep Pro, and Pontoon Guard. So give your boat the performance edge. Put on the protection the pros pick. Megaware KeelGuard.
The PowerPole Charge Marine Power Management Station is the most advanced system of its kind available on the market. It does the work of 3 devices, a traditional battery charger, a charge on the run, and an emergency start system, all in one compact unit. The Charge lets you run your boat's accessories the way you want to run them by allowing you to monitor and control your power usage through the PowerPole app. It automatically devotes power to the batteries that need it the most for maximum efficiency. The new Charge from PowerPole. Power where you need it, power how you need it, power when you need it.
Aaron, like I mentioned in the intro for John, a little under the radar, but now BassEdge Nation knows this guy is the real deal, man. He's got something special going on, and it's going to be exciting to watch. But before we talk a couple about John's interview highlights, I want to swing back to our Seg B, George Acord from Susquehanna Fishing Tackle, talking about ICAST. I want to throw another tidbit on a product you don't want to sleep on that I saw at ICAST. And that was a company called Bubba. They make, of all things, like fillet knives and some fishing tools, and this kind of thing has been their mainstay. But they came out with a scale, Aaron. Probably the most popular scale, you think maybe the Rapala, right?
Right, for sure. That's what I own.
Yeah. Probably the Rapala scale is most there's some things that can be improved with the Rapala. We all know it's hard to see. Just the touch screen is really nice, but it's not fluid, I would say, right?
Right.
So,
especially when you're trying to cull and you've got your hands are wet and everything else. Great
point. So Bubba is coming out with a scale in 2023. It's not available yet, but they debuted it at ICAST. And dude, this thing is legit, bro. It is absolutely legit. It has like a little toggle, kind of like a video game push button deal. So you're not actually pushing the screen itself. And it's got a couple of different functions where you can fish against a few friends. You can do tournament mode where you're, similar to the Rapala scale where it keeps your best 8 or best 5. And you can actually set it to what the tournament is. Or it could be even best 3. You could set it to best 3. So it's got a couple additional functions. And the cool thing, too, is it connects to an app on your phone. So you can play with other people at other lakes or people on the same lake and kind of do that live scoring, seeing what their weight is that was weighed on the Bubba scale. So I got to throw that out there, dude. New ICAST product, the Bubba scale, the Digi scale. And so check that out.
Very interesting. I will definitely do that because even though, like you said, Rapala is probably the premier from a tournament perspective of having the bends and the culling and things like that.
Yes.
Anxious to see the Bubba scale.
Yeah, it's cool stuff. Actually, I'll throw a shout out to Bassmaster.com. They actually also have a video on the Bubba scale. So Google the Bubble Digiscale, Bassmaster.com. You can watch a little video that they did there at the ICAST booth. So check that out if you're interested. Secondarily, let's swing back to the present, where we just talked to John Soukup. And dude, what do you think about that success, right?
Well, I mean, not only the success, the thing that really stands out to me, Kurt, we've talked about this many times. You know, we used to have the pond boss on here, fisheries biologist back in the day. And,
right.
You know, one of his comments that I always remember, he said, biologists will start the answer to a question, well, we think. John's assertions were different because of growing up raising koi fish. And then that whole story, you can see why and how all of that has came together in what seems like a short period of time, but it's really, you know, they say it takes 10,000 hours to be an expert.
Right.
He's got a lifetime invested in this.
Yeah, he does. And he mentioned in the interview, one of the very first people to ever have live sonar on his equipment there back in 2000, and I think it was 18 at the FLW Cup. So, dude, that's been a long time working with that stuff. And now he's not just focused on the fish. He's dialed in. Oh, there's this, there's that. But it's the environment around him that's really telling him a story. That live is giving him that information of that story, so he can ascertain more quickly when to go, when to stay. Is this going to be productive? Maybe, probably not, or whatever that case is. And also he's interested in, I'll go take it back to the Rick Clunn days, right? His interest is in the behavior pattern, not necessarily just the fish catching, but he really likes to understand or put that puzzle together of what the fish patterns and behaviors are, which leads him, I feel like, to that catching success. So great story on John Soukup. I'm super stoked he was able to hang out with us here on the show. Brother, it's been a freaking, I don't want to say a marathon, but a solid length episode with some great information.
Yeah, a little longer than usual, but I think that's perfectly okay. ICAST episode always brings with it, you know, some added time just because, and we didn't even begin to touch everything that was covered there, just really some of the highlights. I also want to point out, you know, John talked about a lot about the mental game, and just as a reminder for those who might be new to BassEdge, Dr. Jay McNamara's book, The Psychology of Exceptional Fishing, how many times have you heard us, Kurt, talk about just the mental aspects and how that plays in? It seems like almost every episode our featured anglers
comes up every time someone is having some significant success. It heads back to the mind for sure.
That's right. That's right. And even within all athletics, you know, people are working with sports psychologists and all that kind of thing. So if you haven't checked that out, be sure to take time to do that. But in the meantime, Kurt, we have, I think, ran over just a little bit, but that's okay. Hopefully, listeners, I know I certainly found a lot of value in the information presented today. Another great show that you've put together. Wish you the best of luck in the coming weeks and look forward to hanging out again in a couple weeks for episode number 382. For Kurt Dove, I am Aaron Martin and the rest of the BassEdge crew. Wish all of you hopefully a little bit cooler and maybe some precipitation mixed in there with it. Have a great couple weeks, everybody. We'll see you August 15th. So long.
The Edge is presented by Megaware KeelGuard. For more information on BassEdge or to shop at the BassEdge online store, visit BassEdge.com. And be sure to join Kurt Dove and Aaron Martin right here on another episode of The Edge, brought to you in part by Nitro Boats,
Midway USA,
Mercury Marine.